Have you ever wondered how much real estate you can truly afford? Is something like this house for $500,000 in your budget? Or even this villa for $1 million? Or just this small bungalow for not even $100K? And can you afford to buy these houses or rent these houses? Especially important now that the mortgage rates are on 10-year highs. And let me tell you something, from working in the mortgage business for 7 years now. It's actually pretty easy with German banks to be approved for a mortgage that is way too high for what you can afford. Being approved for a mortgage and being able to afford a mortgage are two completely different things. That's the classical house rich, cash poor story, in which people can't breathe anymore for 20 or 30 years until they paid back their mortgage. And so you don't do this to yourself and buy or rent a property that is within your budget. You can watch this video. Let's talk about how much housing you can afford to rent real quick before we come to the 3 ways to calculate how much real estate you can afford to buy. Because that's the easiest. In our latest video about FIRE here in Germany, financially independent, retire early, we talked about the 50-30-20 rule. The 50-30-20 rule is a very popular budgeting rule that recommends to spend 50% of your income on necessities, 30% of stuff that you want, and saving 20% for retirement or any future wants or needs that you might have. Not sure about you guys, but I would put rent in the 50% needs category. So let's see how much we spend here in Germany. On average, we spend 27.8% of our net household income on rent. But more than 3 million households, which is like 7% of all households in Germany, spend more than 40% of their income on rent. And 1.5 million households, or 3.5% of all households in Germany, spend more than 50% of their income on rent. Now that's a little much if you ask me, and if you ask the 50-30-20 rule. Because needs include other things like groceries and whatnot else. I realize that the big cities are expensive, especially Berlin or Munich, where I live and pay rent too, but you should still keep your rent in relation to what you earn. Living below your means is one of the best signs of a healthy financial situation. So here's a table that will help you out. Spending 20% of your income on rent would be incredibly good from a financial perspective. 30% is a little above the German average, and 40% is the absolute maximum one should spend in my opinion. 50%, as 1.5 million households had it according to the statistic earlier, is way too much in my opinion. So if you earn 2,000 euros a month gross salary, which is, according to an online salary calculator, 1,472 euros net, your rent should be anywhere between 300 euro in the best case scenario up to 600 euro as a maximum. And then it goes all the way up to 4,000, 5,000 euro gross salary, which is kind of the German average, where you should spend right around 1,000 euro on rent. Can you afford a mega luxurious penthouse in the middle of Berlin or Munich with this salary? Probably not. But you can still find some really good options if you're willing to go a little outside of the city center. Like this apartment for 10 euro per square meter that is a little over half an hour away from Munich. Above 6,000 euro gross is where you can actually get more net for your gross by switching to the private health insurance. Check out our playlist about that if you're interested. We still calculated with the public health insurance costs of over 1,000 euro per month. Now that we know how much real estate you can afford to rent, we can talk about how much real estate you can afford to buy. Because buying is significantly more expensive than renting. We talked about this in a video just a couple of weeks ago. And if you want to know how insanely expensive buying can really be, then you can check out this video of a real world case where a couple bit off way more than they can chew. Now, when it comes to how much real estate you can afford to buy, there's no definitive answer that we can give. There's no hard limit that you can afford. No one is able to say that you can afford 500,000, but not 500,001 euro. There's only a soft limit based on 3 rules of thumb that can get us pretty close to your maximum affordability. At the end of the day, it will also depend on the property you'd like to buy and how much a bank wants the deal. As the average mortgage is a little over 300,000 euros, it is much easier to finance 500,000 because banks really want the deal. If you can afford it, of course. Much easier than trying to get a bank to finance 80,000 euros. not a lot of banks will be interested because the deal is too small and they don't make a lot of money with you. Okay, here's rule of thumb number 1 from the savings perspective. When you buy a property, you have to pay for the property, of course, but you can get that finance from a bank, so it's actually not a big deal. What you can't get financed really are the closing costs that consist of 3 different things. First and mandatory are the notary fees. The notary makes sure everybody understands what's going on, that the seller is selling his property and the buyer is buying it, and he also gets the new owner into the land registry. For that, he gets 2% that you have to pay on top of the property value. Second is the ground purchasing tax, which is also mandatory. Depending on the German state your property is in, you have to pay anywhere from 3.5% all the way up to 6.5% on top of the property value in ground purchasing taxes. And that is one of the reasons why we split the furniture from the property in the purchasing contract for our clients. Because you pay ground purchasing taxes only on the property and not on furniture. That is one easy trick that helps our clients save thousands of euros in fees. And if you would like to benefit from that as well, you can find a selection of our investment properties on perfinex.de/properties or book a free meeting with us on perfinex.de/meeting. While the first 2 parts of the closing costs are mandatory, the real estate agent is optional. Some deals work without a real estate agent, our deals for example, which saves you an additional 3.57%. Summing it all up, you have closing costs anywhere from 5.5% up to 12% that you want to have in cash. We usually take 10% as average, so if you have 20,000 saved up, you could afford a property of roughly 200,000 euros. Next rule of thumb comes from the liquidity perspective. A bank will only give you a mortgage if you can pay them back. Judging from meetings and comments, some of you seem to think that a bank doesn't care. Because if you can't pay the mortgage anymore, they get the property, right? Right. But a bank is not a real estate company. They will take your property, that's true, but they don't want your property. Talk to any bank out there and ask them yourself. They would much rather go everything according to plan and you paying your mortgage every single month. Banks want your money, but they don't want your property. And that's why they will check if you earn enough money to pay them back. Let's make an example. Here's a property from perfinex.de/properties in Berlin for 295,000 euros, including furniture, which we split in the purchasing contract as I explained earlier. So whoever of you guys buys this property saves roughly 3,000 euros in fees just this easily. Closing costs come on top to bring the investment total to 316,000 euros. And if you finance with current realistic conditions, 4% interest plus 1.5% principal, you would have to pay the bank a little over 15,000 euros each year. Of course, you get rental income to offset that mortgage, 1,000 euros in that case, which leaves you with almost 370 euro positive cash flow after tax. A nice 13% return on your money per year. Pretty good, if you ask me. Now the bank will look at certain stress scenarios. What happens if you don't have a tenant for a month or 2? So even if you fulfill rule of thumb number 1 and can pay the closing cost of 20,000 euros, you could not afford a vacancy here with a 2,000 euro gross salary per month. Again, there's no hard maximum here because it will also depend on how much money you spend each month. A bank looks at your income and expenses. And that's why a bank would much rather finance someone earning 5k and spending 3k than a person earning 10k and spending 10k. But to afford a property like this worth almost 300,000 euros, you should probably have a net income of at least 2,500 euros a month, better 3,000 euros a month. Is this a lot of money? Yes, but real estate is not cheap, guys, especially in our capital, Berlin. And it's not just that the bank wants their money back. Because we're here in Germany, there are also tight regulations for banks. So even if they wanted to give you a mortgage, they are not allowed to do it if there is no realistic chance that you pay them back. The exact details in the law are a lot more complicated, of course. Check the Wohnimmobilienkreditrichtlinie if you would like to read more yourself. For everyone else, here's the TLDR. If a bank lends you 100 times your monthly net income, 300,000 euros with 3,000 euros in the example we had just a moment ago. All good. But the more you go away from that 100 times, 105, 110, 150, the more banks will drop out because it will be too risky to lend you money. Every bank creates a portfolio of loans, some more risky and some less risky. So again, it depends. That's why we can't give you one specific number on how much real estate you can afford, because it will depend on the bank and if they're looking for a little bit more risky mortgages or less risky mortgages for their portfolio. But these three rules combined can get us as close as it gets. So hopefully you could learn something in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.